Greetings, podcast listeners. My name is Kurt Schneider, and along with Tom Thordarson, I am pleased to bring you episode 1 of All Things Thor. Tom and I talk on a few occasions about bringing his rich history and design to more people, and this podcast is the result of those chats. Like me, I'm sure you've always wanted to know more about Tom and the work he's done. Tiki, theme parks, and everything in between. We hope that this podcast will bring all of us together in a fun and creative way, and we look forward to hearing from you, because that's what's going to make the adventure a great one. So without further delay, let's jump into the first of what we hope will be many episodes of All Things Thor.
You know, this is a great opportunity for me to be able to kind of give a little inside glimpse of what has made me or shaped me into the adult, if that's what you want to call it, that I am today. And my career, how it shaped my career, how it's, in my mind, given balance and happiness to my life. And I have to give the greatest credit as something that I always turn to, and that is the Tom. Of course, my name is Tom Thordarson. Other people have created the nickname Thor, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But I had an extremely happy childhood, a very vividly imagination-rich childhood. And I don't know if it's a combination between my natural capabilities of having a very, and you've talked about this too, a photographic memory. Mm-hmm. But my memories of my childhood are extremely vivid, like little movies that are in little separate movie rooms in my brain that sometimes if I choose or sometimes if I don't choose, I find myself sitting in one of the little rooms and reliving an experience. And my childhood developed my imagination because of those around me, my parents and my grandparents. And it also taught me about my fellow man or interaction with other people. I think that it in my mind is no different to be 9 years old and get a feeling about how you get along with somebody, if they're going to be a friend, if you make a friend,
right?
When you're 6 or 9, and when you're 50, and when you're trying to figure out whether a business relationship or a intimate partner relationship is going to work. It all go for me when I'm in question now as an adult. I go back to the little boy and I go, "What would you do? What would you think?"
Yeah, would this work? Would I hang with this person? Would I have a positive experience, or would they turn out to be somebody I really didn't want to spend time with?
Yeah, exactly.
Do things with.
Exactly. And we've all known situations like that, right?
True. Yes. Throughout life, it's not the type of thing that disappears at a certain age either. It follows you, like you said. Mm-hmm. And it is true. Even if you're 30, 40, 50, you have that innate thing in you that says, yeah, this is okay, or not so sure.
Yeah, the chemistry's not there. There's something, I'm big on intuition. I got rejected from jury duty twice.
Oh, twice? Wow. That could be luck, though.
Well,
in some people's eyes.
For many people, yes. And the reason was, on both accounts, and I actually felt offended because I was willing to go in there and sit and listen to this thing and spend a day doing my duty. But when the attorneys would question me, when they do that thing at the beginning, the jury, when they ask you questions, how do you feel about this certain circumstance? Or have you ever had an experience with a gang member or a blah, blah, blah? Mm-hmm. What would make you, what would be the basis of your judgment? I kept saying, well, I feel like, and then they kept stopping me. No.
Oh.
I go, and I didn't understand what no. Just factually, have you ever had? Tell me. Well, this one time I felt like this one guy. Well, stop.
Too much.
And too much feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. This isn't about what you feel.
You weren't lawyerly enough.
Right.
You were human.
I was human.
Yeah.
And I go a lot by my intuition, and just like what you just said, you get there's a chemistry that sometimes goes beyond words, where you feel a kinship with another person, or even an animal, and vice versa. And so that's kind of a funny little side note, that that's been not a struggle, but a challenge my whole life. That I've always been a very intuitive, feeling sort of person, and so I've sometimes gotten my most friction or inability to work with maybe a person or a situation based on the fact that they're wired differently than that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's true. Well, it's as a creative person too. You find that I have found as you go through life, you'll see that there are those that slowly become, I won't say less creative, but they're very buttoned down, and they go further down that path to move up the ladder of whatever it is that they're attempting to do.
Yes.
And then there are those that are creative that kind of go, all right, if I go up the ladder, okay, but you know what? I'm having fun right now doing A, B, or C. If something positive happens from it, great. But, and then you'll slowly realize that guy or that gal, they don't have the same, they just don't see it the same way that I do.
Same agenda or the same way.
They got a different ultimate, goal for the end of the whatever.
Absolutely.
And you figure it out pretty quickly. Like a lawyer, at jury duty. They're looking for a specific type, I guess. Yeah. And if you don't fit within that parameters or that constraint, then out the door.
They simply said to me, juror number 2, you're excused.
You said, thank you, go have lunch.
I'm like, are you sure? What did I do? Anyway, but so, and that goes back to even early childhood. I think some people would say I was a sensitive kid. I'd get my feelings hurt easily, and my parents. That tended to be one of their strategies, I guess, to shape my behavior was, and I should be thankful for it. My mom and my grandparents and everything would always, if I was contemplating something and got mad at somebody because, let's say, they were trying to bully me or something, and I would say, well, I'm just going to go tell them something that insults them. I'm going to tell them they have funny hair, or they've got funny nose or something. And they would say to me, well, are you sure you want to do that? Because, can you imagine how they're going to feel? I mean, you're going to end up hurting their feelings if you say that. Mm-hmm. And I would think about that. And I think, you might make them go home and really cry and feel really bad. And for some reason, that resonated with me as a kid, and I thought to myself, I started to feel differently about this kid who, was bugging me, and I was just ready to knock him in the nose, and yet, so they taught me compassion, and I guess is the only word I know, and so I've always been that way, and it's been to my advantage sometimes, and then other times, I think people without question took advantage of me.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Yeah. I've had that happen too.
Yeah, which we all, that's how you learn in life.
It's true. It's true. Well, I was a teacher, and during one of my summer breaks, I decided I was going to come out visit my sister, who lives in Santa Barbara, California. And one of the highlights was, coinciding with my visit, there was a concert in Santa Barbara, and they have a bowl, the county bowl, which is carved out of the hill.
Oh, wow.
So you sit in this, literally a bowl, and it was the Brian Setzer Orchestra, big band, from, he was with Stray Cats.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see him for years. So got tickets, sits down, sisters with me, and a couple of young kids in front with their family, and then a somewhat rowdy group in the row directly behind us. They had been drinking and having a good time all afternoon.
Obviously.
Well, they come out and the band's playing and they're singing one particular song that I can't remember, but it was, they were changing the lyrics and mentioning underwear and, So I'm sitting there going, these poor two little twin, they look terrified, these little twin girls. So for whatever reason, the teacher in me decided I was going to lean back to this, must have been 10 of them, unruly group, and kind of say, hey, do you think maybe, you could just bring it down a notch? Because, I'm thinking the little kids. So I turn around and lean in to the guy, and I said, hey, buddy. And the guy leans forward, and I said, these kids, set an example for him. And what does he do? He grabs me by the collar, pulls me back, and he gets ready to slug me in the nose. So my sister, who's sitting next to me, sees this and says, let go of my brother, and grabs the guy. And now this melee of 15 people breaks out, because I was trying to, I felt, empathy toward these poor little kids. So I went, yeah, that didn't go right. Teacher, I was like, he's going to listen to me. And he'll go, oh, thanks, buddy. Yeah. So.
And it went in a different direction.
Yeah, but I can relate to what you said. Is, you have to have people in your life that give you that sort of think about.
Yeah.
In this particular case, I don't think I really thought of the flip side, like this could go horribly wrong.
Right.
But I was thinking it was, but it's a trait that a lot of people have and a lot of people don't have. I mean, point to tell you right there, I'm thinking one way and that guy was thinking another way.
Yeah. And you never know. I think that's one of the big lessons that you learn in business. And when I was at Disney, sharing ideas with other people in a room and different things, you're amazed. You learn that you're going to be always disappointed if you expect everyone to think the same way you do. And if I think some of the biggest disappointments in life, at least for me, are when you expect someone to react the same way you would and they don't. And when I was younger, of course that is much more disturbing. But then as you experience more life, you start to go, well, that's just the way things are. I'm going to have to accept that, And,
some things you have the ability to change or to sort of steer in a particular direction, and others it's just like, nope, not going to happen.
Absolutely.
You never know. It's kind of like two people walking up for a gunfight. You don't know how it's going to go. A gunfight usually goes one particular way, but you don't know until you know. And I guess that's part of the whole process. That's the whole life thing. Is you never know what's going to. But in a creative way, I could see that. People think Disney or they think Universal or whatever, and they think, oh, it's all these wonderful, happy people that are churning out this stuff that's just amazing, and they must all have they're having birthday cake every day in the break room.
Ball,
They're having a great time, and I can imagine that's probably not the case.
Not as many times as you would anticipate, although those things happen. I think that from the get-go, for some reason, I always got put into the jungle in order to
That's a bird.
I love that. I would right away out of school, I got, quote, advanced into positions of design leadership. And like when I joined Sequoia Creative, right out of school as a concept illustrator and designer, they whatever they saw the quality or the tendency in me, they always had me being this person in between management, corporate or the business managers, and creative. And I always got the dirty job of being in between and going to the creative people and explaining why we can't do something because it's not going to work for some budgetary reason or for some other reason. And then I also had the dirty job of listening to my comrades, the people that I considered my battle. If we were in Vietnam, they were my comrades that I was in battle with. And how do I now? I'm supposed to go up and talk to the general or the sergeant and explain to them their side of the coin, why they don't want to run out there into the jungle, and convince the guys that are moving the chess pieces that aren't, have the same experience as we have. I got in that position when I was about 26 years old, and so it was hard for me to know who I was. I just wanted to be an artist.
Right.
I wanted to be a dream maker, and I wanted to, and my being naive in the beginning when I first started, and I was first hired by Bob Gurr and Dave Sweninger and Tom Reidenbach, the three guys that had just left Disney and started their own company. They had a lot of faith in me and where I was going, and gave me a lot more responsibility than I think I should have had at that time of my life, looking back on it. But I just, the only thing that worked was like is trying. You were touching on this a minute ago. The only thing that would work for me is just like being as honest as I could about how I felt about stuff. And I wouldn't try to, go back to the design department with the illustrators and make up some story. I would say, they don't want to spend the money of the ideas that we just came up with. They don't like, they don't like the profit margins and all that. They don't want to spend the money. So we can do the most fabulous job we can back here and dazzle everybody with artwork and everything we're doing. Yeah. But they don't want to spend the money. And it's not that they don't appreciate us, but the fact is we got to do something for half the amount of money. So we can complain and moan about it all we want, or we can actually, say what can we do with rubber bands and paper clips that's going to impress somebody,
Right. Kind of dig in your heels and say,
yeah.
This is what we got.
Exactly.
See what we can do.
Exactly. Because I think I've always believed a lot in, and later on when I got much more experience and spent time at Universal and Disney and different places, the people I admired the most were not dictators. The ones who ran the show, the personalities that were dictator-like, I think got the least out of the creative resources that they had. Mm-hmm. If you got in there and I remember reading about Texas history and Davy Crockett when he was asked to go to the Alamo, and Colonel Travis, said, "Okay, well, wow, you're a legend, David Crockett. So we're obviously going to make you a whatever it was, a general or something." And Davy Crockett said, "You know what? I'll pass on that. Just call me a high private."
Yeah.
I want to be with my boys.
Right. It's not about.
Yeah.
Right.
You can ask me to lead. You can ask me for my opinion on how to provide example and leadership through what I know, but I think that's the best way to influence a team, as if you're one of them.
Right. Well, sometimes you end up with that divide wedge, between, and then there's the ones that try and make you know or make you aware of the fact that they are at this level and you are just the lowly, whatever it is, designer or, whatever, anything in life.
So they control through fear.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
especially when you're young, when you're very young, they added emphasis. You don't know what you're doing, youngster. You know, so you just toe the line, and then you go, but I have an idea, or there's a way, or I have this thing, and they're like, no, that's not how we do it around here.
Yeah.
That happened to me when I started as a art designer person. It was like, this is how we do it. You will do it this way, and you will like it. And you go, but
yeah.
But you learn how to kind of navigate that.
Yeah, and having been a teacher as well, when I taught at Art Center for 5 years, College of Design, when they first were developing their entertainment in the illustration department, their entertainment design program, and I was relatively young. I mean, I wasn't that much older than the students. I mean, so it was kind of awkward,
it can be.
But they asked me to, come teach this because there was no one else doing it at the time, and all the students were asking to learn about it. They wanted to learn how to be theme park designers, but there wasn't a program there that taught that. And anyway, I used to say to them, let's work on this. Let's all see what your individual strengths are, and I think that, and the way you can relate to a subject. Like for me, I've dealt with so many different subjects, many of which, when I heard I had to come up with a ride for or a story and a ride and experience, I'd go, oh my God, please don't make me do this.
Really?
Or even if it's, let's say it was at the time about the Alamo, I mean, I knew about the Alamo, but the only thing I was interested in is Davy Crockett and Jim Bowie and the Bowie knife, and a few of the little things I knew from Fess Parker. You really want me to come up with a story about the Alamo, and yes, and an accurate one, yet entertaining and everything, and so
all in one ball of So it's, I guess, not to pop the pixie dust bubble, but it's a job.
It is a job, yeah.
You may not always like what comes across your desk. You might just go, "Oh, are you kidding me?" You're not You're not doing what it is that you might particularly like.
Yeah,
you got to do what I guess the simple terms, what the boss wants.
Yeah, and that is, I think, one of the at least it used to be, and I'm sure it still is. But when I was there, not that long ago, it was, you had to find a way. You had to find an avenue, is what I'm saying, to make it interesting to you. Mm-hmm. It was, again, not to keep going on. I'm just using the Alamo. Not even that was specifically a Disney project. It was a separate one. But, the only thing I was interested with those two characters, and then I was interested in, my grandfather used to hand carve the stocks of hunting rifles for people.
Oh,
so he'd hand carve these scenes in the maple and the different woods, and he'd do inlays and things like that. And so I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. The Davy Crockett's rifle, Old Betsy, when I went to the museum. And so I started with little things that I was interested in. And what was the real Bowie knife, the very first Bowie knife, and got hooked up with an expert on that who showed me actual collections and things. And I worked my way from things I was interested in, and I spiraled out, learning a little bit about the Texas history, about the Tejanos, and about the everything. And next thing I knew, as opposed to what would have been a horror for me before, to just sit down and read chapter after chapter about this history, I had learned all this stuff, and I was reciting dates, and I was
So
yeah,
without thinking,
without
really,
even thinking.
you took the journey without thinking about it, putting too much.
Right, and then I was able to put that in an entertaining way for other people to learn with that same sympathy that people aren't going to want to sit in a room and watch a history lesson, but how can I have them have an immersive experience where they walk out of there knowing things they didn't even know were being injected.
You're educating them without letting them know, right? You're giving them some smarts.
Exactly.
For lack of a better term. Yeah, well, I guess that's the goal, right? Is to entertain and educate, inform, educate.
Right.
You know, that's like the Lincoln thing. You know, you go, oh my God, this is not Lincoln, but it's Lincoln. But at the same time, we're learning about history. You know, so it's clever. I mean, it's a neat way of. You know?
Yeah.
Of course, you're disappointed when you go back to school and all you have is the teacher at the front of the room with a chalkboard and not an animatronic, but you know.
Right. And it says, read chapter 6. We're having a quiz tomorrow morning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, we will not be having animatronic Lincoln reciting for us today.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, since that's part of what I want to do on this whole program, I'm sharing very personal experiences. I think I probably had a reading problem when I was a kid, because even though I could technically read, I could read out loud, I could do everything that looked or appeared to be like what a normal child can do. I had what, I'm just guessing, maybe now they would have called it some form of ADD or something like that. I wasn't hyper or depressed, so I don't know if it would be technically ADHD. I just don't know about any of that kind of stuff. All I know is that I always had a very vivid imagination, and I always wanted to create my own stories. Mm-hmm. So I'd start to read a chapter that we were supposed to be reading quietly in the classroom, and I'd read, but then I'd be reading along, and I'd see a part of the book that was telling a story about a knight riding a horse through a beautiful forest, and I was getting into it. Next thing I knew, I'd already turned the page twice, and I had projected a whole nother direction that that knight on the horse had gone. Mm-hmm. He was off doing something else, and then I was thinking about his armor and him, you know, raising the hood of his armor to be able to take a drink of water in the stream, and then I'd go, I just read 3 pages that I have no idea what the book is about, that I'm going to get a test on or the teacher's going to ask me about. Yep. And I'd have to go back and force myself to reread it. So reading was a laborious process for me. It was, you know, it was a chore. And I know my mom struggled with, you know, teachers saying, well, you know, I don't know. I don't know if it's his comprehension or what it is, because on the test, you know, he didn't do so well. Mm-hmm. But the drawing on the back of the test was beautiful.
Exactly. I've had that experience as well. I remember we used to have the book fairs.
Yeah.
And they would line up all those books on tables, you know, in the elementary school. And you would go through with your little bag and it'd say, pick, you know, you had, I don't remember what the amount was, but maybe you had $2 to spend on a little paperback book. And they had all different kinds, you know, like novel type, you know, reading adventures. And then they'd have ones that had a lot of visuals. Yeah. And they may not have been appropriate, the material, but the visuals were stunning. You know, when it had been like, you know, as a second grader or first grader, it might have been Tales of King Arthur's Court, you know, in a 10-point type, but it had these beautiful black and white illustrations.
Oh, yeah.
So that would go in my bag. And then people would be like, wait, you're in the second grade. You can't, there's no way you can read and comprehend this.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'd say, no, well, it's the story. I don't care about the story. I said, you see these beautiful images in this book. I want this because of this artwork. And they would be, you know, they're very concerned. Your parents have to come in. This is the book he's chosen. This is way above his level. You know, and my mother's like, well, you know, and I go, but it's the artwork, you know, or, you know, it was something completely different. But nobody was looking at it like he's choosing this because he likes this aspect.
Yeah.
You can't have that book.
I was the same way.
You can't read this. I said, I'm not reading it. I want to look at the,
I was exactly the
I've got my own thing going on in my head because of this picture of, the guy or the knight on the horse.
Yeah.
And off it goes. I don't need what's in the book. I just need that one launch pad, and then I'm off to the races.
Gosh, that's so much like me. And matter of fact, I almost feel like I had that same book about the knights, and it was way above my head. It was, but it had great pictures in it. But in your life, and I'm sure you've had this, there's a lot of people that influence you, and that you have to think, well, why do I think this way, or why am I? And right around, early around that time, and it's a whole nother topic I want to get into another time, but my Uncle Charlie, who my bird is named after, my African gray, used to come over only on holidays, and he was technically my grandmother's uncle, so he was my great uncle, but he was sort of I don't know what word to use. He wasn't the black sheep of the family, but he was very unusual. So my grandma
he was that uncle or
yes.
Yeah.
His wife, had left him long ago, and since she just walked out on him, and they never got a divorce or anything. So he was always waiting for her, which was just a sad story for him. Oh. He goes, she'll come back sometime. I mean, we're talking about this. It's been 30 or 40 years,
Yeah.
And so my grandma always felt sorry for him and invited him over for holiday events. And then eventually I got to like him so much, I would beg to have Uncle Charlie over. So she would say, okay, let's have Uncle Charlie over. The reason I did is he'd drive up in this old beat up Chevy Impala that parked under an olive tree. So it was a white Impala that was peppered with stained black olives all over the darn thing. And he'd pull up, and he'd always bring me something. Mm-hmm. And it was always about science. He was actually a very intelligent man. And the reason he never wanted you to go into his house, my grandma said she went in there one time because she was concerned about him. And it was loaded with experiments from room to room. He had Heath kits of electronical experience, his own creations he was doing, ham radio, tons of stuff he had. Mm-hmm. And so what he would do is he would sit with me for hours and tell me about all this stuff. And I'd go, Uncle Charlie, how does a phone work? And he'd go, let's sit down and think about it. And he had this very specific way of talking like that. And he'd go, Tom, did you ever wonder how how electricity works? Well, it starts with, positive and negative. And he'd go on and on and on. And I was fascinated by the guy.
Yeah.
And then he'd bring this little kit that he had bought for me, and we'd put together a crystal radio and lay it out on the driveway.
Yep.
Or he'd go, okay, let's learn Morse code. How would you like to? Det, da, 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 det. Do you know what that meant? And and of course it would drive. My grandma would just be like, "Holy!" And so I'd go around the house as a kid, 6, 7 years old, going, "Dit, she'd go, stop,
stop the Morse code.
Yeah. But Uncle Charlie was one of those guys who influenced me a lot, because back to the idea of not that this is something I'm saying everyone should do, but he was the example of the total, probably extreme version of creating his own bubble and his own world and his own happy place. Mm-hmm. Uncle Charlie was in bliss, and he made a living by being a sign painter, which is now no longer a trade.
No,
but he was a sign painter and silk screener, and did signs and things for people in Los Angeles in the 50s, 40s, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so these different people, you start to realize when you look back at who you are and why you think certain ways.
Yep.
You start to go, hey, Charlie, I'm part of Uncle Charlie, you know? I've got a little Charlie in me.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, as you were saying that, I was thinking of myself, my dad, ham radio, electronics, photography. My poor mother would suffer through watching TV, and after dinner he would go downstairs and fire up his ham radio to talk to wherever, and he would hit a certain transmitter thing that he had built from a Heathkit, and the TV would dim while she's watching it. And so the next thing would be the stomp on the floor. George, you're messing up the TV.
Like Grandpa Munster.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, what? You yell at, she's like, you're messing up I'm trying to watch the news, And so, but they finally came to this, thing, I guess, that give and go where she would say, well, I guess part of my watching the news is going to be him down there, fire, the lights in the house are going dimming, and it was like the Addams Family. But the flip side to things like that is, like you said, your own bliss, your bubble. It has an effect on people. Mm-hmm. And he worked for the government, and they would get these crazy surplus things.
Yeah.
So one day a truck pulled up with a crate that was the size of like a Jeep, like a huge wooden crate. And my mother, of course, again, mortified, what is this, like the old school looked like Indiana Jones. Yeah. They were putting it in a warehouse. He pries the wood open, and it's a full-blown generator.
No.
Full-blown, like gas, steel, welded tubes. So she's looking at it. This thing's now in the driveway. Well, what are you going to do with that? He says, I'm bringing it up. He built a house. Yeah. He built a little shack in the backyard with all his radio gear. He says, you just wait. He says, whenever there's a disaster, we're going to be good to go.
Oh, my gosh.
So
I can so relate.
He got all these guys. I don't know. Still, I was little. They brought it up. They put it in this side of this house thing that he built. And he rewired it because he knew electricity. So when the power went out, if we had a storm, this back in Massachusetts, he'd go out there and clank, bang, 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 and the house would light up. And we're the only house on the street. We got electricity. He would get out the waffle maker. And he'd start making waffles. People are coming down the street. Like, what? Why? What's going on?
Why do I smell waffles?
Yeah. And he's like, come on in. We'll have some waffles. He's making waffles for everybody. And we had, lights were going. And the thing, when he passed away, that generator was still up there.
That is wonderful.
And that's the kind of thing. It's like Uncle Charlie. It was like that was his happy spot. He was. We had electricity. He's making waffles. He's taking care of people. Yeah. And my mother's going, oh, not again. Another. But,
I love that.
They finally got that give and go.
It was sure, and
which happens.
It happens. I think some of the. I've seen some incredible relationships. Where. Your first impression sometimes is, how in the world did those two ever become a couple? Because their personalities are so different.
Yeah.
But then you realize there's some sort of ionization that must happen that makes it work. Yeah. Yep. And catalyzes things, if anything.
That's true. It's true. And that's another one of those. It just things that just kind of follow you through life.
Yeah.
Something that happened here affects you there. Because now, I always laugh whenever I'm doing something like this, electronics or photography. Mm-hmm. I go, oh, Dad, I blame. He's the one that sparked that interest. Good or bad, to the chagrin sometimes of my lovely bride. But I think, it's the same thing. I'm doing my version of dimming the TV at night after dinner, and she's going, okay, all right, I'll put up with it today, thank you, dear.
That's great. Yeah. And, relating to Bob Gurr and my earliest times at Sequoia, the design department had a certain area, and it was partly because I encouraged this, but I eventually had a staff of about 20 designers.
That's a staff.
Yeah, and anyone who wanted to lift their spirits or that we could that would needed a good laugh, they'd come back to the design department because we got a lot done, but we were nuts back there. We were crazy.
That's usually how you get things done, though, right?
And I'm gonna get a hold of a couple of the guys, and have them talk with us.
Oh, that'd be great.
And tell some of the stories because you got to remember some of the people that are coming in and out of there. We had at 4:45 before it was time to leave, Bob Gurr would come walking in from his engineering department where he was engineering on King Kong for Universal Studios in Florida or Catastrophe Canyon. They were working out all this engineering stuff, and we had Universal executives in and out that were working with Bob and peeking at stuff that we were helping do in the design department, building models and et cetera. Mm-hmm. And the stories I would hear, and Bob would come. Oh, so it was Bob Gurr's storytelling time. And he'd come back there, and Bob would just kind of roll in there. He knew it was almost the end of the day, and we were always excited to see him because, somebody would say, "Okay, Walt story." And okay, well,
good old days.
Yeah,
and I remember when.
And he would tell these great stories, but some of the funniest ones were how, even things like I remember him saying, the lights at the end of the and I won't do a Bob Gurr impression. I always start to, but I won't. But the lights at the end of the that you see at the end of the Pirates of the Caribbean, with those little lights that eyes, the little eyes that are looking at you.
Like bats.
You see all those eyes
going up the ramp.
Yeah, up the ramp. Yep. And he goes, sometimes the simplest technology is the most effective from an engineer, because he'd give these little lessons in engineering, and sometimes you can over engineer something, and sometimes it's simpler. He goes, what those started out to be? Well, they were just literally tin soup cans with holes cut in them and a light behind them, and they were stuck back far enough so that you couldn't tell what they were. Yep. But when those lights were twinkling on and off, you saw these little lights that looked like little eyes going off and on different things. And
eyeballing.
He said that was an easy one. That was an easy a special effect. And
that's funny.
And that was like one of many stories he had. He had great stories about, and so did Dave Sweninger when they were at the Maple Building and testing things and all the shenanigans that went on.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure
the funny things that happened with the animatronic figures. Oh, my gosh, they were just great stories. But so those kind of times, would happen there. And and I was going to say, in the design department, it wasn't like now where everyone, when I go see design departments now, if I'm brought in on anything, it's all a bunch of people in one big room, and they all have their personal devices and headphones on.
Oh,
nobody's talking to anybody else unless they're off at a small conference table talking about something. Mm-hmm. All these designers are sitting in their pods, 2 feet apart.
They're
small
cubicle space.
Yeah, and not interacting. There's just a glowing screen and headphones, and their heads going like that because they're playing whatever music they like or whatever. They're in their own world.
Wow, so that's a
totally different
different vibe.
Yeah, when we were there, we would all say, "Okay, what do you guys feel like playing today?" Because we'd have one big huge boombox radio in the middle of the design department, and everyone was crazy enough that we would listen to a hugely eclectic amount of stuff, anything from crazy old jazz music or blues, to yodeling music, and we'd all be in there going, we all knew our different cues.
Yep.
To Disney music, we'd say, let's just play on a soundtrack from Mary Poppins.
Yep.
or let's, and just this huge amount of crazy stuff. And sometimes it would just get totally out of control for a moment, and to burn off energy, I remember us playing things like AJ, which I'll introduce you to. We did this thing one time to get everyone's attention. He played some sort of funny circus music, and I was going, and they didn't know it, but we had replaced, X-Actos have the silver handle with the little number 11 X-Acto pointed blade.
Yep.
We took silver Mylar and cut out what looked like X-Acto blades and put them in there. So, Mylar is just a little, flappy piece of paper.
Yeah.
And we did a hand-to-hand juggling act where we were throwing X-Actos to each other to catch while this music was going on. And everyone in the design department was cringing.
Terrified.
Going, oh my God, you guys are absolutely stop.
What are you
You're
doing?
Crazy. And
that's great.
Yeah. But stuff like that went on. And it created this huge, first of all, it created a bond between all of us.
Yep.
And, and there's this other designer I hope I can get a hold of, Terry. When she was interviewing for a job there, they had maybe the director of design after like 3 years. And so I had to interview people or different things like that. Well, anyway, they're bringing this girl in as a show set designer, which the architect at that time was hiring, not me. And he brings her into the design department, and I didn't know anyone was coming in. And I'm dressed up. I used to have to dress up, so I had a tie with a nice white shirt tucked in.
The corporate, yeah.
And but I could kind of lose it sometimes, to burn off energy. So AJ was playing the soundtrack from The Wizard of Oz, and it was the part where Scarecrow is doing his dance. Oh yeah. So I was able to really do that real well. Get really floppy and flop on the ground, and I could do the whole thing.
Yeah, the very bendy.
I had no idea. And he comes back to introduce this girl to her first day at work and meet the director of design.
And there you are.
And she goes, that's him right there. And I'm flopping around on the ground. And I remember Terry said years later, she goes, I'll never forget the first day I'm coming to meet you. And I'm thinking, oh boy, what the heck have I gotten myself into, but that was the way it was. And we had fun. And like I said, people from project management who were kind of depressed or the financial officer used to come back there just to sit and howl and watch what was going on.
Just to see. Yeah. Well, that's when I taught. It's similar. Unlike now, where like you said, with the headphones and everybody kind of just compartmentalized.
Yeah,
we would do that. The guy I worked with, I would spontaneously, if I saw it was getting a little,
stale.
Down or stale, I'd jump up on top of a drawing board, and go, everybody now stand up, just do something crazy. They thought the teacher had lost their mind. I'm up standing up holding the boombox, waving it around. We're all going to do this now, or I'd chase somebody around just something crazy. And half of them would go, yeah. And the other would be, the jaws would.
Yeah. They're like, what's going on?
What is he doing? He's lost his mind. What are we doing? Or I'd burst out the back door outside, something just to jar them and have them go, just to break it up. Yeah. Wasn't anything on the level of Bob Gurr coming in and go, but everybody was a cohesive family,
right?
Kind
exactly.
Of thing,
that's what it was.
It was more like because we spent same thing. You spend 6.5 hours a day with high school kids. In my case, you learn the ins and outs and the intricacies of each person, and what might make them not happy or happier, and it's a long time. I would imagine, like if you're working on a project, you're with the same group of people from the get go until that thing is
until it's done,
it's done, right? Finished and shipped or whatever, signed off on, or and you have to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you don't, then it just becomes you're going in and just rubber stamping every day.
And luckily, all the personalities got into it. We were fortunate. because in the beginning, when a new person would come in, I think they were a little overwhelmed at what was going on.
Yeah, I imagine
but
that.
Then they loosened up. Yeah, and I could imagine that.
Yep.
But
What did I get myself into here?
And these days, all the things we would do, all the levels of jokes. Of course, nobody was offended because we made fun of everything in the world.
Yep.
And but looking back, when I was talking to AJ, that again I'll introduce later, we were talking on the phone about a week ago. We would have lasted about 1 hour, and we would have been HR would have taken us out by the ear
under today's standards.
Under today's standards.
Yes. Yes.
So, but everyone was.
Yeah, that's just
they
the
knew
way
how
it
to
was.
laugh at each other, and everyone was fair game, and everyone.
And it's the kind of thing too that if you were that one or two outliers, that you would eventually, because you didn't want to just you didn't want to be that guy or that girl, you got it. Okay, I get it. I'm not going to be a stick in the mud or whatever.
Exactly. And then again, of course,
you warm up to it.
At least there where I was, like, of course, there wasn't anything really. I mean, there was nothing like no sexual harassment or anything like that going on. It was just all pure lunacy fun. Matter of fact, I had met a guy who had worked at and then had come to where we were, and he said, "Did you guys know that? Do you know who Tex Avery is?" And I said, "I've heard of it, the name." And he goes, "You ever see on the Warner Brothers cartoons says Tex Avery, blah blah blah." And he used to have they used to put him in the back with his group in a separate trailer behind the studios because those guys got so out of control that they literally had to keep them
out the door.
Yeah, and he goes, the design department here is very reminiscent of the type of stuff that would happen.
That's a compliment, though, I would think.
I thought it was.
I would take that as a compliment.
I'd say, well, that's great.
Yeah,
and we weren't. There was all a very talented group. So had we not been producing, I can see how we would have been told, knock it off. But they couldn't deny that we were pumping out some great stuff,
knocking it out of the park. Literally, they what are they going to say?
Yeah,
leave them, let them do, let them be. Well, I guess that's the way it was back in the day with Walt's guys, right? He had that collection, and some I imagine some were probably more straight laced than others, but the ones that the Roly Crumps, for example, who were just more, I didn't realize, I'm a musician, so buy guitar strings, buy bass guitar strings or whatever, and there was this crazy artwork on all of them. Most of them were called Slinkies. It was Ernie Ball guitar string. Mm-hmm. So American Eagles, and some of them, Eagles with strings, like it was a play on, like on a dollar bill, there'd be like an eagle with holding the arrows.
Oh, yeah.
So it was that kind of thing, like an eagle, but with guitar strings and these really cool looking, typography that was large and then small and then big, and it looked like old carnival posters. So come to find out, it's Roly Crump. Oh, he designed all of these guitar strings for Ernie Ball because it was they're I think in L.A. or California company. So he was doing this stuff on the side, designing these things, and it was like, oh, now I get it. Now I look at it and I go, oh, that's clearly that's a Roly Crump thing.
Yeah.
But, that's there were, I guess, those that just went in and clocked and did their as long as they got the work done, great. But then there are the ones that were a little more off. Yeah, beat off center or whatever, and that was great. Right. Sometimes you'd have to rein them in, I would imagine, but same thing. The creativity, you do that kind of stuff. You'd be a little wacky. You'd play jokes on people, or it's a bird.
Exactly. I love the bird.
That would be Q.
That's Q.
That's Q the macaw.
Q the macaw.
He's letting us know he's around the corner.
He's our heckling audience of approval.
There you go. I like that. I like that.
So I miss those times a lot, and I think that's when someone has asked me recently if you could, and if there was a project that they asked you to come back on, would you go back and work at Disney? And My honest opinion is I don't think I would, because from everything I've seen, everything I've witnessed and heard and everything, it's a completely different process than it was when I got into the industry, and the things that I enjoyed most about it, that I don't think I could. I think I'd get very. I'd lose my enthusiasm, and my magic. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Very quickly, and I'm speaking from a personal opinion. There might be other people that may disagree with me, but that's how it would affect me.
Well, I see that, as a musician and a recording music type guy. Back in the day when you were working with a band, you went into a studio, you saved up, and it was multi-track tape. And the tape reels would go around, and you had mixing board with fader, and you wanted an instrument louder, you turned it up or you turned it down. And then it became digital and all done on computers.
Yeah.
And it's lost that sort of hands-on feel. You'll see here, we're recording now on a board with actual mechanical faders.
Sure.
And I have to have that.
Yeah.
I've tried doing it the new way with everything's on a computer screen, and it seems like it's lost some of its soul.
The tactile
aspect. I want to turn this knob and have this happen.
Yeah.
I don't want to click and drag a mouse.
Right. I understand.
So, it takes a little of that. It becomes more of a chore and less of a, hey, this is fun. Turn the horn section up. So I could see, especially what you just said about how the camaraderie and everybody's going out to the design department just to let off, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to see that, like you said, anymore.
Not that I know of.
Not to that level or extent.
No.
It's more of a, here's what we need to do.
It's much more regimented.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more management from, when I designed Journey to the Center of the Earth for Tokyo Disney Seas, I was brought over from Universal and given essentially an offer I couldn't refuse. Come over to Disney and to be given an e-ticket attraction, actually several in the land in Mysterious Island. And they basically had enough confidence in me to say, we want you, we trust your style. We like, everything about what you've done and everything. Here's a few other ideas that some people have done in the past when this was going to be a studio tour and et cetera, et cetera. You can use or not use any of that. Otherwise, boom, it's yours. Yeah. Yep. The only restrictions you have is that we're still trying to figure out how long the track system is going to be and all that kind of stuff. And I think rather than me get into that whole thing, because there's a whole very interesting story about the early part of the development of Journey to the Center of the Earth and my experiences. I think
that's an episode.
I think that's an episode in itself. So I won't get into that.
We'll save that. We'll put that into the future column.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we're going to have plenty more to come. I don't think you're going to have any shortage of material, and we haven't even touched upon your whole tiki.
No, we haven't even gotten into tiki yet.
So we'll be going down that pathway at some point too, and I'm sure Q will be very thrilled to hear that too. That's
probably what Q is saying. Is that what about tiki?
What's going on with the tiki? Yeah, you haven't brought the tiki up yet. Yeah. So we'll be touching upon that too. I think we're going to have boundless materials, subjects, categories going forward. I think it's going to be an awesome journey to take with you. Speaking of journeys,
I appreciate that, and I think that, and you and I were talking about this earlier. What I'd also really like is, I'd hope, is that listeners will take some ownership in this and have their own questions, things maybe that I might take for granted and not even have brought up or talked about, or on a number of different subjects that I'll be touching on, including even, we could even get into, as you said, the how-tos on certain things. There's certain, Okay, there's certain things I can't talk about, of course, as an artist because of proprietary reasons or something, because of some of the companies that I work with, and there's certain techniques and things that I can't. But for the most part, as an artist, I really am open about sharing how I do things and how I approach things and techniques and different things like that. And I think some people are going to be interested in that. Others are going to be interested in just the backstories of the people I've worked with. Again, like Leota Thomas, Adam Leota from Disneyland, and others. And also people, I really want to at some point talk about one or two people that what I call kind of unsung heroes, people that the general public will never know about, but that were some of the most influential people in my career, who would just simply didn't have any interest to be the one standing up at the podium talking and taking credit for anything. They were just so fully absorbed in love with what they did that they could care less about anything else. And unfortunately, many of those ended up getting laid off or other things because they weren't watching their backs. And some of those same people, and you have to at some point in a high corporate environment, the realities, in all honesty, is the better you are, the more people that don't like you as well as like you.
Right.
I think it was Jim Morrison was interviewed one time, and they asked him at that time, around 1969, I think it was. There's a tape where he's being interviewed, and one of the questions was, at the time, they go, "Why does it bother you that you're known as? I mean, that so many reviews, are they're bad mouthing you guys. You guys are kind of becoming, the anti band. That they're a little bit too bad and a little bit too out there and a little bit too everything, and that they're hating they're hating you guys. There's a whole bunch of people that are saying they hate the Doors. Even though you can't dispute your popularity, they still don't. And Jim Morrison goes, does it bother you? And Jim goes, and he thought about it, and he goes, you know what? Well, I kind of relish in that thought. The band that people love to hate. Yeah. He goes, there's something I really do kind of relish about that. You can't, obviously, I think that when you get good at something, you're really good at something, you're going to have as many people who hate you as you do that really look up to you and adore you.
Yeah.
And so anyway, some of these people just weren't interested that I was talking about in notoriety. So, and they were very talented. And so I think some of them, personally, my opinion is they were more of a threat to people who were wanting to increase their notoriety. Mm-hmm. And so these guys got swept out of the way, and people never knew about them other than they experienced their magic in the theme park. And
that is an unsung hero, really, when you don't know.
Yeah.
You have a face to associate it or a name.
No.
You just enjoy whatever it is, and you'll never know.
Yeah.
It's true. I've actually thought that just because that's my nature. I remember going on an adventure through inner space when I was a kid, shrinking.
Yeah.
And crying. I was in the line with the parents going, I don't want to be shrunk. Then my dad's like, well, they're going to bring you back at the end. Yeah. And I was like, and then one day I was thinking, who came up with, I'll never know who it was. It could have been famous, or it could have just been somebody who said, hey, let's shrink,
Right.
But that effect that it had on me, they'll never know. But boy, they scared the bejesus out of this little kid thinking, I'm going to be shrunk down to the size of a mushroom.
And if it doesn't work.
What am I going to do?
Living in a shoebox when you get home. Right?
And the brain goes in 40 different directions. Well, how am I going to deal with this? What are they going to do with, how am I going to get home?
I know.
But, somewhere out there was somebody that thought, hey, this is a cool idea. Let's do this. So,
yeah, exactly. And many of those people you will never know. I was fortunate enough to meet some of them, and I credit them for making me fall in love with the industry for a duration of time. And but anyway, So we have a lot we could we can get into.
I think we shall at some future point. We'll try and cover as many things, and we did get some really, really awesome questions already. That are a basis to use as a springboard for some other stuff. Some people have asked about painting with rum, and some have asked about how your childhood affected which we kind of talked about today here. How did that influence some of your design stuff later on? And so, I mean, there's the nice thing about this is we can go in really any direction we want.
Yeah.
Whatever strikes our fancy, we say, hey, let's talk about whatever it is today.
And today we I admittedly have a tendency to wander.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all.
So sometimes you'll have to reel me back in and say, okay, remember today we're talking about tiki.
There you go. Well, I think we're off to a good start. What did we end up? We ended up with 1 hour and 6 minutes recorded. Great. So awesome. So I'm going to pause, and we will continue later.